and welcome to the Wine Enthusiast Podcast, your serving of drinks culture and the people who drive it. I'm JC Tops, assistant editor here at Wine Enthusiast. This week, we're taking a look at an emerging distillery company based in Ohio. I sat down with former design and brand executive turned master distiller Adam Hines to discuss his award-winning spirits company. Just opened in 2017, High Bank Distillery has been collecting awards all over the country for their craft whiskey. So listen on as we discuss Adam's change in career, how the pandemic impacted the up-and-coming distillery, and how his background in design and branding has helped him create a successful business. Hello, I'm JC Tops, assistant editor here at Wine Enthusiast. Today, my guest is Adam Hines, who is co-founder and master distiller at High Bank, an Ohio-based micro distillery. Hi, Adam. Happy New Year. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Happy New Year. Thanks for having me.
So, you are co-founder to High Bank Distillery.
Correct.
Now, I was doing some research online and I saw that you previously were in design. How does one go from design
It's a very natural progression
to making whiskey?
Yeah. So for me, my background, like you said, is in design and brand management. I went to art school. That's what brought me to Columbus, Ohio. I have just obviously always been a fan of creating. And so never thinking that whiskey was in my future. But my dad has lived in Louisville, Kentucky, which is, about a 3-hour drive here from Columbus for about the past 16 or 17 years now. And one of the things when, I was in my early 20s that my father and I would do would be, we would ride motorcycles together. And I remember riding through, horse country down in Kentucky and over the border into Tennessee. And, we'd do day trips kind of all around there. And my first ever rick house, that I saw, it was these massive white barns. You could just smell, the whiskey. A couple miles further down the road was the entrance to the Jack Daniel's distillery. And so the first distillery that I ever set foot on was at Jack Daniel's. And we did a tour together, and it was arguably love at first sight, never knowing that was going to lay groundwork for, what the future would have for me in the whiskey business. But it became what my father and I did together. So when I would visit him, ride my motorcycle down to Kentucky, we'd hang out, go for a weekend and ride around. We just started going to distillery tours. And so I've probably been on 50 or 70 distillery tours down on the Bourbon Trail down there. And again, never knowing that was kind of laying the foundation of knowledge and interest and relationships and all that stuff. So when I had the opportunity here in Columbus with my business partner at the time to create a concept, we were trying to create a concept together. I was doing, design work and owning my own design firm at the time. He asked if I wanted to be a part of opening up a restaurant with him. And I said, well, only if there was something fun, attached to it, like a brewery or a distillery or something like that. And so for us, we decided to do a distillery. And then from there, I figured out how to distill and blend. So
I love that story. I love that. It's fairly new. You launched in 2017.
Correct. Yes, we were established in 2017, bought our equipment and started experimenting. And we opened our doors in May of 2018.
Oh, okay. Awesome. How was the pandemic for you?
The pandemic was really interesting for us. So, here in Columbus, we have our distillery, but we also have a very large restaurant. So, we have about a 17,000 square foot building, give or take. And, that building has about a 9,000 square foot restaurant up front with about 230 seats or so. And then we have about an 8,000 square foot facility in the back, which is where we do all of our distilling. And then we are off topic. We are about to expand into another 17,000 square feet next door to triple the size of our distillery.
Oh, wow.
But the pandemic was a double-edged sword for us. It sucked from the restaurant perspective because we had to close down. Ohio closed its doors for about 2.5 months for all restaurants. But from a distillery standpoint, consumption of alcohol was up. It really helped brand awareness because we did, much like many other distilleries, we shifted. I kept my whole kitchen staff and manager staff up front employed because they just became distillery employees. We all started making hand sanitizer together. So I went from having, a handful of employees back there normally to having a dozen, and we were all bottling and labeling and packaging hand sanitizer. And My sales team was now shifting to calling nursing homes and fire departments of who needed hand sanitizer. And it was actually, I mean, fun's probably not the correct term for COVID, but for us, it was just a really engaging time. It was really a good community building aspect for us.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I definitely hear that. I'm based in New York, so that's
Yeah, you guys were
I
shut down
definitely,
any longer.
yeah, exactly. So now your actual whiskey brand is called something else. It's Whiskey War, correct?
Correct.
Or
Yeah.
okay. Now, why is that different as opposed to your actual distillery?
Yeah. So again, being a brand guy and that being my background, I love stories, and we need to be able to tell a story with whatever we're doing. So researching on products, what I didn't find beneficial for craft distilleries is that when they would just use their one name, they would put that across the board, from a vodka to a gin to a rum to a whiskey, to a agave spirit. It would be their name plus that spirit name underneath of it. And there was nothing super differentiating about that. And if you look at, what the bigger guys do and what well-established brands do, they have individual brands for what that is, right? And so that goes into a lot of different things, the naming of it, the style of bottle that you use. I mean, all of that stuff. So from the start, for me, it was really something that I was paying a lot of attention to on the name of my products, the style of bottle that my products were going into, because when you have somebody picking up a bottle of vodka, historically, not, again, this is just kind of broad strokes, vodka is consumed mostly by women. Women associate something lower calorie or lighter by a tall, skinnier, clear bottle, right? Something that fits into their hand nicely because they have small hands. Men are a bit more like Neanderthals, and we go in, we pick up two bottles. They could be the exact same. One is heavier than the other, and we think that's a higher value, right? And we have bigger hands, and we want something that fits into that hand. And so, I spent a lot of time doing that research from how people interact with different brands. And that's really what led us into doing these different individual stories. And so, for a story like Whiskey War, well, let me back up actually. The name High Bank comes from, we wanted something that was local to Columbus, but we didn't want to call ourselves a Columbus Distilling Company, because as soon as you go outside of our city, who cares about Columbus? I mean, really. And so for me, I wanted a name that was a little more generic, but that still tied back to our history. And so when Columbus, when Ohio was trying to figure out where they were going to place their state capital in 1812, well over 200 years ago, there was a couple areas around the central Ohio that they were thinking about putting that capital. And one of them was an existing city called Franklinton. And Franklinton was in an area called the Bottoms. But what happened, why they didn't place the city there, was because there was a high risk of flooding. And in the Great Flood of 1913 that happened here in the Midwest, there was 7 feet of water that came in and flooded that entire area out. So knowing the risk of flooding, the developers decided to build a new city called Columbus on the high bank of the two rivers that were right there, the Scioto and the Olentangy River. And that's where we get our name, High Bank. So we tell that story on the bottle of every vodka, and that's one of our flagship wholesale products is our vodka that we have. We have a gin that's called State House Gin, and it's a hand-drawn picture of the Ohio State House, and tells the story of that behind it. And then Whiskey War is a fun one for me. So there's a suburb here in just outside of Columbus called Westerville, Ohio. Westerville is about 12 miles as a bird flies from downtown Columbus, and it's actually where my wife and I and our 3 daughters reside. Is here in Westerville. We have for the past 8 years. But Westerville's history, in 1875, there was a gentleman by the name of Henry Corbin that was trying to open up a saloon in Westerville, Ohio. Well, Westerville was also home to the women's temperance movement, one of the largest anti-saloon league propaganda printing presses in the country as well. And so when Henry Corbin was trying to open up a saloon, there was a large riot that happened outside a couple days before he was opening that up. And later that night, people rolled in 2 barrels of gunpowder, lit it on fire, and blew up his saloon.
Wow.
Well, Henry Corbin then 2 years later rebuilt, and in 1877 tried to open up the saloon again. Well, the exact same thing happened. A riot happened outside, but this time Henry Corbin decided to take the matter into his own hands and started firing his pistols to disperse the crowd. And this is all documented. There's a newspaper clippings about this. And so it's said that single act of him shooting those pistols in the air, and the story goes that a crazed and drunken Henry Corbin was shooting at men, women, and children. That is what was written and spread across the country through that printing press and that mailing facility. And it is said that that single act is what ignited the whiskey wars, which then led to prohibition in the country. And so Westerville is home as a prohibition museum at it. On our bottle, which is called Whiskey War, at the top of the bottle, every bottle is two cross pistols toting back to the history of Henry Corbin. So
That's amazing. I love hearing like the backstories of how things came about.
yeah, I like stories and I like nuggets. Like, I mean, for me, the bottle's nice. It looks pretty. It looks great on a shelf. But then if you can take it down and you start reading it or you start diving deeper in it, there's legs behind it. So
Yeah. So Ohio does have a history with whiskey, a long history with whiskey.
sure. I mean, especially with the Ohio River, right? I mean, we're right across the border from Kentucky,
Right.
the tri-state area down there. I mean, the Ohio River into the Mississippi River is how really the aging of whiskey and the transportation and the using whiskey as a barter system, really started.
Okay. So now, are you making bourbon? Is because I know well, not everyone does know that all bourbon is whiskey, but not all whiskey is bourbon. Are you making bourbon and or whiskey or?
Correct. Yeah. So for us, what we do and where Whiskey War was kind of born, knowing that we were starting this from scratch and that we didn't have a previous distillery set up for years prior, I'm not a fan of young whiskeys. One of the, over those 10 years prior to opening up High Bank, when I was traveling with my dad and visiting distilleries, I kind of, that was the time I guess I was really refining my palate and what I really enjoyed. And I'm not a, what they call, baby bourbons. I didn't want to open up our distillery with a 6 month and then a 12 month and then a 18 month and kind of stair step in like most craft distilleries do. What we decided to do instead was take the time to blend a whiskey. So we source Whiskey Wars and we're very open about it. It's 3 different mash bills, 3 different recipes that we source and bring in-house, finish age in-house, and blend to our specific ratio for what Whiskey War is. Nobody else has that ratio. It's ours. It's unique to us, and that's why Whiskey War is what it is. The reason why we did that is it allows our own bourbon that we do make in house to properly age. So we just crossed over 4 years of aging on our own product, and it's still not out yet. So to me, there's no rush. I knew that I wanted it to age at least 4, possibly up to 6 years. We are tasting it. It's good. I'm excited and can't wait for it to come out. I also can't wait to continue to blend with it to see what I can do with combinations of Whiskey War and the High Bank bourbon and that sort of stuff. But I mean, that's correct. We do make bourbon from scratch in-house from, grain to barrel to bottle. It's just not released in the bottle yet.
Okay. That's what I was thinking. I was thinking that you made. Okay.
Yes.
It's just not out yet.
Correct.
I actually have tasted Whiskey War, and it's actually really, really great.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
I'm excited about it. I want to thank you and your team for sending me some.
Yes, absolutely.
So about your barrel program, like I know like you were doing some wine barrels. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. I mean, so again, I just love experimenting and creating and trying to figure out, unique ways to go about things. And obviously, I mean, we're not the first to barrel age a whiskey in a wine barrel or anything like that, but we did come up with a barrel program here called Whiskey War Barrel Select. And what that is it allows us to source really, really high-end wine barrels or cognac barrels or sherry barrels. I mean, different things that we've had shipped over from overseas or across the country, brought here into High Bank, and taking that award-winning Whiskey War blend that we have and second or third aging it into some of these different barrels. And the expressions that come out on the other end are just, we've had such a positive experience with. Unfortunately, these products have never been released outside of our distillery, because they are single barrel offerings for us. We get about, 240 to 200 and maybe 60 or 80 bottles per barrel because they are a little larger. They're usually the wine barrels that are, 59 gallons. We sell them all at barrel strength. They come in a beautiful packaging with a 3-dimensional metal pistol cap and a black velvet bag, very kind of Blanton-esque, but in our own Whiskey War style. Every time we put them out, they sell out same day. So there's just not enough to go around at the moment.
Right. Now, as far as the other whiskeys, you do have a direct to consumer program?
Yeah, we're going to be in Michigan, which is going to be through Woods Wholesale, and we're going to have all of our products through that in Q1 of this year, which is coming up. We are also getting ready to expand in the state of Kentucky, and then obviously we're around the state of Ohio right now. So Q1 and Q2 will be direct to consumer and in the state of Kentucky as well as Ohio, and then as we continue to assess which other states that we want to go into in the Midwest to start.
Okay, awesome. So I know a lot of people, I'm not going to even tell you some of the crazy myths and misconceptions I've heard about whiskey.
Yeah.
Are you good about debunking a lot of misconceptions about whiskeys and like what they're made from and how they're processed and when and where you can drink them?
I mean, if you have specific questions, sure. I tend to have a decent amount of knowledge.
I mean, well, I know a lot of people that can feel like, oh, well, I can only drink whiskey during in the winter times, or I can't pair whiskey with foods, or things like that.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think one of the things that I discovered, especially with blending whiskeys, is how well they pair with foods, especially when you're thinking of a dessert. Whiskey goes. A lot of whiskeys go really, really well with a lot of different desserts when you're talking, chocolates or creams or different stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, when I was coming up with the blend, the reason it took me even 9 months to do it, I mean, the story around that for me was I would take I had all these samples from different distilleries around the country, and I had one daughter at the time, and I would steal her medicine Tylenol medicine dropper out of the cabinet, wash it out real good, but one of those ones that are the milliliter style things, and I would go down each night and I'd be taking, 2 milliliters of this, one of this, three of that. And I'd be making these different blends and tasting them blindly. And I'd be rating them each night on which one I like, because what you discover is depending on what you eat changes the flavor profile of that whiskey. So, there's a lot of bottles that I've had on the shelf where I'm like, oh, that was not good. And then I put the cap back on, and then it's 6 months and I've never had it again because I'm like, that was a bad buy. But then I open it up again and I tried. I was like, holy crap, this is totally different. And what we find is a lot of it has to do with what you're eating. If you're going to eat something that's really intense, like a garlic or onions or something like that, obviously that's going to affect anything that you drink. A glass of wine or a glass of whiskey or a gin and tonic. I mean, everything will be affected by that sort of stuff. But when it comes to pairing whiskeys, I definitely think when I'm eating a standard meal, if I'm going to have a nice steak or a chicken sandwich or something like that, I'm going to typically stay on the lighter side of whiskey while I'm consuming like my actual meal. And then come dessert time, I want to go a stronger pour. I want to go something that's a bit more of a barrel strength, it's more robust, that when you're going to eat something with that dark chocolate, you're going to then pair it with something that's really, has a lot of body to it, has a lot of legs to it. It still has the oil that's unadulterated, I guess, where you haven't added any water or any ice cubes to it or anything like that. And so you get that the nice texture of the chocolate interacting with the oil of the wood and the whiskey and all that stuff. I mean, the experience can be really, really nice.
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously you run a restaurant, so I'm sure lots of people have questions about pairing whiskeys with food and other types of spirits as well. I mean, I guess, like, because you guys offer a lot of other things too. You offered vodka and you offered gin as well, right?
Yep.
Okay. Pairing food with spirits it's I feel like it's becoming a really big thing, and I feel like a lot of consumers don't know where to start.
Yeah, I mean, some of the standard things that if you want to try different flavor experiences with whiskeys, I would stay pretty basic and do some chocolate, do some different nuts, whether it's cashews or pecans or like a macadamia nut, and then go into dried fruits as well, because cranberry versus a raisin, versus a mandarin orange that's been dried out, you have completely different flavor profiles, right? And so, like that orange will pick up more of the citrus inside of a whiskey or complement more of that citrus, and that dark chocolate will maybe get more of those deep, earthy leather notes, out of that whiskey a bit more. I mean, there's definitely kind of some standard things on a tasting wheel that are good to pair with whiskey to start. So we here at High Bank, we do these things called flight classes that we'll bring 25 people in, and we'll not just taste through our spirits, because we know we love comparing our spirits to other spirits. We'll do it a flight class with, Buffalo Trace or with Maker's Mark, have our spirits and their spirits, and explore and celebrate the differences, between each ones, and pair them with light eats, so people can kind of understand what a lighter whiskey tastes like, what a deeper, darker whiskey tastes like, and what that experience is.
Okay, awesome. Is High Bank Distillery, is it organic? Are your spirits organic?
Our vodka is made of 100% organic wheat, but we do source everything locally here in Ohio. All the grain that we use is Ohio grain. The only difference is our facility is not certified organic. We have not paid the money or gone through the process of making sure that every single thing that comes in here is certified organic. What I'm most focused on is flavor. I will tell you, I would not buy organic product unless it tasted the best. So I'm way more about making sure the product tastes good before, even I give the example when I give tours. So far, every single grain that's been brought in here is made in Ohio. But if Ohio has a bad harvest one year, I'm not going to source Ohio grain just to stay Ohio grain. I'll go to Indiana or Pennsylvania or New York and source better grain if they have it, because I'm in the flavor business. I'm in the business of making things taste good, not necessarily in the business of making sure, I source everything from Ohio, if that makes sense.
Right. I guess I'm wondering, do you see yourself heading organic in the future?
I think, again, it comes back to there's so many factors. And I mean, you can imagine, especially right now with rising costs and inflation.
Right. Yeah.
I have a hard time ever seeing going fully organic for a lot of those reasons, because on the flip side too, again, it's all about quality, one, for us, but then we also have to have a business plan that supports and can keep people employed, and so there's principles and morals that we try to stick to, but at the same time, one of the biggest things and that I have to be aware of is making sure I can keep my staff employed, and we can have a great work environment, and have a viable business for people to raise families off of.
Okay. Amazing. But you are part of the 1% for the planet, correct?
Correct. We are. Yes.
That
So
makes you more sustainable.
we absolutely. I mean, so one of the things that's important to me is, I grew up camping and loving nature and hiking and traveling and all that stuff. I mean, that's when you're out on motorcycle rides with your father too, and you're just in the country the whole time, you see how beautiful everything is. And you go through a lot of trashy areas too. And it just makes you feel really depressed and sad. And so if there's ever an opportunity for us to try to become carbon neutral and make decisions that benefit the planet, we're all about it. And so that's what made our decision pretty easy to join 1% for the planet. We were already looking at switching over to some eco glass options, which is what we use for our vodka bottle. And, with switching over to eco glass, and we try to upcycle a lot of different things. We partner with a local company here who takes all of our most of our bottles that we consume here in-house at our restaurants and turns them all into candles, which is honestly one of our highest sellers at Christmas time is the Whiskey War candle. So I mean, we're just always trying to look for ways that we can, kind of give back to the community and give back to the planet. We partner with locally here. We partner with a organization called Flow, which is Friends of the Lower Old Tangi Watershed Project. They do a lot of tree planting, and they're the ones that help take care of the river around here, which is where our story of High Bank is built off of. We also nationally we partner with One Tree Planted. Again, because there's such a shortage on white oak, which is what we consume the most of as a company, right? We consume a ton of white oak because we're buying barrels and filling them with whiskey all the time. And so why not try to grow more oak trees while you're consuming a lot of oak trees, right? I just feel like that's responsible.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. But I also your company has been winning so many awards. I was doing research about that, and your whiskey and your spirits have been winning so many award competitions.
Yeah,
Congrats on that.
Thank you very much. I'm not going to lie. It's just gone past my wildest expectations ever, of even receiving an award such as what we did, a year and a half ago when we won Best Blended Whiskey in America at San Francisco. I mean, that's the largest competition in the United States. Now it's the largest competition in the world, and just this past year, there was over 5,000 entries that went into it. And then to win it a second time in a row, to be awarded best in class, best blend of whiskey in America. I mean, that just doesn't happen. And even the COO of San Francisco called me personally, and she's like, who are you? I was like, well, that's a great question.
I mean, it's like your company is like so new, but that's great. Congratulations.
I appreciate it. I mean, the only thing I can, I don't know, like we try to make sure how we execute things is excellent, but so many people try to do that. And I do just believe like what I make is what I like from every product, from my vodka to my gin to my whiskey, right? And obviously I obsess about brown spirits, but the only thing I make is what I like. And so the only way I can describe it is the palate that I have is what the palate of the people, I guess, what most people enjoy as well. So
you have to give the people what they want.
Yes.
One final question.
Yeah.
When you were not drinking spirits from High Bank, what's in your glass?
Ooh, that's a great question. So I love lots of things. So I have a pretty large collection. Well, what I call it, what I tell my wife is it's research, right? I have several hundred bottles of research in my office, but one of the ones I'm always a fan of like shelfers. What can you always find? And in Ohio, it's a little different than other states. I understand that. But for me, from a whiskey standpoint, I go pretty classic with like a early times bottled and bond is probably one of my favorites just because here in Ohio, it costs $25 and it's a liter and it's delicious, for the price point. I also, one of our most popular products that's come out in the last few years here is our Whiskey Ward Double Oak. It's one that sells out often. But my inspiration for it was because I loved Woodford Double Oak, just regular double oak, 90 proof, $50. You could always find it on the shelf here in Ohio. That was something that I still do really enjoy today. But the thing that I'm on the biggest kick about is tequila. I love tequila.
Yeah, good choice.
So if a nice Reposado or a Clase Azul, I'm a big fan of. And that's also detrimental to my budget because I'm realizing there's so many tequilas out there. And while I have several hundred whiskey bottles, now I fear that I may start collecting lots and lots of tequila bottles. So,
okay. Adam Hines from High Bank Distillery, thank you so much for joining us.
No, I really appreciate you having me. Thank you.
From blending to aging, crafting award-winning whiskey is not for the faint of heart. It's also not just for large distilling companies. Hearing stories like that of High Banks Distillery makes me excited for the spirits category. The more diverse the producers, the more interesting the category. What are your thoughts? If you like today's episode, we'd love to read your reviews and hear what you think. And hey, why not tell your wine-loving friends to check us out too? Remember, you can subscribe to this podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. You can also go to winemag.com/podcast for more episodes. I'm JC Tops. Thanks for listening.